The Old West has changed. Far are the heroes fighting to uphold the law, under the haze of the unforgiving sun that burned just as strong as the conflict across the entire American frontier. But as a genre born out of the romance towards the frontier mythos, it was only a matter of time until it was revealed just how violent the truth was. Thus began a new interest for the Old West, one with no more heroes or villains, only men who fought for what they believed in and had the strength to carry it on, be it their own sense of justice or just plain old greed. It's safe to say that this deconstruction of the Western genre has overtaken the original concept in the collective unconscious. That if you present a Western to someone nowadays, they'll be expecting to hear the tales of drifters and gunslingers, of corrupt authority and all of those who suffered by their hands. While the setting is undoubtedly accompanied by strong political ties of the past, the reason it managed to keep up with more contemporary genres is that at the core of it, it speaks to the common struggle of the human condition, of injustice and prejudice, and that was and always will be a recurring problem of society. Although, with all of that in mind, it's also true that some are just in for its iconic aesthetic. Cowboy hats, tumbleweeds, gunslinger duels. When stripping it all to the basics, it is a pretty cool setting. At least once in their life, a man should just roll to where the wind takes him, get involved in the town's problems, sling a gun or two to solve it all, and then maybe, just maybe, ride into the sunset, never to look back. All of this just to say that the concept of the cowboy, that masterful gunslinger, will forever be a timeless type of cool. And wouldn't you know, Japan seems to think so too, as it played a vital role in stimulating the Western in the most unexpected way. In 1961, the great Akira Kurosawa released Yojimbo to Japanese theaters. It told the story of a wandering samurai stumbling into a small town where two rival houses fought for control, and now he decides to play into both sides for his own benefit. Despite the history of this situation not being entirely clear, so goes the tale that after Yojimbo released in Italy, director Sergio Leone watched it with some friends who suggested that the movie would make a good western. Fast forward a year, and A Fistful of Dollars is released, which slowly but surely catapults both the career of Clint Eastwood and the popularity of the spaghetti westerns across the world. It became so famous that Kurosawa happened to also see it, and then proceeded to send a letter directly to Leone, stating that "It's a pretty good movie, but that's my movie," and then hit Leone with a lawsuit so good that he actually made more money from that than from his own film Yojimbo. However, that didn't slow down Leone, as he would later direct two more films, which are now collectively called the Dollars Trilogy, proving once and for all the popularity of spaghetti westerns with the closing film of the trilogy, The Good, the Bad and the Ugly, which is so iconic that even if you haven't seen it before, you certainly heard its main theme. Even back then, two different countries with completely different cultures were able to find some common ground in their past, both leading to circumstances that caused the creation of the wanderer archetype, a master of his trade who the world forgot as time is ever changing and civilization evolved past their need. It's no wonder that it was only a matter of time until Japan tried their hand at the Western, as you would expect from them, it wouldn't be anything less than eccentric, so it's only deserving that it gets an equally eccentric name, something I would like to call the Sushi Western. While it serves me well as a catchy title for a video that is immediately self-explanatory, I am perfectly aware that it doesn't make much sense when trying to compare on a deeper level. The spaghetti western, which amusingly enough is called macaroni western over in Japan, was mostly used to criticize the traditional western, intentionally or not, while what I'm calling sushi western is just cowboys abiding to the Bushido code and all that cool factor that implies. In layman's terms, it's a western with anime sensibilities. Although, much to my disappointment, none of these have ever featured someone doing a judgment cut with a revolver. Don't ask me how that would work, I just feel like that is something obvious that should have happened already somewhere. After the gun blade and the gun sheath, I think anything should be possible. As time is of the essence, I'll constrain myself to showcasing only 3 examples of this bullshit I just invented. So buckle up, cowboy, it's game time.
Once upon a time, a blue-eyed boy from the Old West learned one of life's cruelest lessons, that evil was bigger than his gun. So he followed the footsteps of a mysterious master to the Far East, where he learned the secrets of the sword and came back home with the heart of a gunman and the soul of a samurai.
Johnny had a dream of being the biggest hero round. There wouldn't be an enemy that he could not put down with a gun. Then one day Johnny met his match and turned his world around. He changed his name and learned the Shogun way, a land of the rising sun, rising day. Samurai gunmen, rising day. Johnny no more.
You have finally made it, my son. This is the last test and my final lesson for you.
Rising 10, the Samurai Gunman.
Oh, they got the cool factor alright. I couldn't possibly pass the chance of showing the intro to Rising Zen, because it just tells you everything you need to know about it right away. Too bad the budget just wasn't there for the gameplay, cause goddamn, this is some stiff action. In case you can't see what the problem is, the tutorial might give you a clearer hint. There are no analogs in that controller. For those who forgot, the original PlayStation didn't ship with its iconic DualShock, but just a basic controller. It took 3 years for them to release the first analog controller, and a couple more months for everyone to have the complete DualShock, the one with the vibration feature that was all the rage back then. This doesn't mean that you can't play Rising Zen with analog controls, but try to use them and you quickly realize that this wasn't developed with a full rotation axis in mind. It's seriously baffling how something like this has happened. The game came out in 1999, when it was already established that the analog control scheme was to become the standard for 3D games, to the point that the original controller was discontinued more than a year before Rising Zen came out. And yet, here we are, trying to be all cool and smooth, while controlling this dude that is almost locked to a grid system. Of course, this is a problem that you can hardly ignore, but it's not the only one. Something that the game fails to explain coherently is how the lock-on works, which should have been important to a game without any other way to control the camera besides one single recenter button. To give you a quick gist of it, when you initially lock on, the reticle will be green and the camera still behaves the same. To really make it lock to the target, you have to attack with either the gun or the sword, and you'll know it's working because the reticle will turn red. There is absolutely no reason as to why this needed an extra step, but it's fucking awful, and the faster you cope with it, the sooner you'll be able to enjoy the game. Even then, with the way the enemies move, you can still lose the hard lock-on, but at least you can buffer the input in any state, so you got some leeway to make it work without losing your rhythm. There's also this inconsistent obsession of trying to make the game a platformer when you can barely move diagonally. At least there aren't any pits of death in here. There really isn't much difficulty to the game in general. The only penalty you get for dying is starting the current stage from the beginning, but the game is pretty short and the stage is shorter, so it's not that big of a deal. This is definitely one game where your enjoyment solely depends on how much you'll be willing to bend to the controls, which might be hard when the whole thing is barely 3 hours, so when you feel like you got a handle on things, the credits will most definitely be rolling already. At least after completing it the first time, you get another playable character and some more difficulty options, so there's some incentive to replay it again once you know how the game really works. If you have the courage to get a wrangle on the controls, I can guarantee that you'll have a great time with Rising Zen. It doesn't overstay its welcome, as it carries the spirit of the arcade experience, focusing on quick, flashy set pieces and unique scenarios. The intro might fool you into thinking that this is just some weeaboo cowboy role-playing in the Old West, but this is actually the hardest a game slips off its own genre, as 80% of the game is basically a Japanese variety show, with all of their weird shit like robot geishas, possessed strawmen and lucky pitcher cats. Also demons, cause of course. This might be a huge stretch, but I feel like God Hand somehow owes a lot to Rising Zen. The sci-fi steampunk Wild West setting, filled with eccentric Japanese tropes, is too similar to be a coincidence. It is a shame how both were cursed to fall into obscurity, but at least God Hand still stands strong after all these years as one of the best games of all time. While Rising Zen really needed one more game with the power of the PS2 to really shine. From now on, just remember that no matter how bad things get, know that Rising Zen will be forever in your heart.
Monster time! Bitch! Boogie Ozaki! Smoking!
You might not know Acquire by their name, but you should at least be familiar with some of their games. Developers of both the Tenchu and the Way of the Samurai series, they're one of the few older studios that managed to stay afloat to this day, and will be celebrating their 30th anniversary this year, so they must have done something right for all of these years. That's alright. If I had to quickly describe Samurai Western, at least in terms of gameplay, It feels like what Rising Zen should have been in the first place. It never reaches the levels of God Hand, because honestly, what can? But it's polished enough to be addicting, which is important to the high replay value design often applied by Acquired. The story as you follow Gojiro, a samurai that traveled all the way to the American frontier to chase after his brother who renounced his life as a samurai because he was smart enough to realize how guns are better than swords. Too bad for him that he's in a Japanese story, so you bet that the swords here are going to be the ones coming out on top. Speaking of the story, while it might not be the strongest point of the game, I absolutely love the cutscenes that play between stages. For such a fantastical setting, it decides to be realistic in the weirdest details, like the two brothers actually speak Japanese between each other, but English to the rest of the cast, heavy accent included, so you know it's legit. Then there's the highly detailed and stylized texture work that looks amazing even today, followed up only to the tightest designs on every character. Wait, hold up, did that woman ever full ass out? They must have done this on purpose, because from that moment forward, every time a cutscene started, I had this Pavlovian response of me screaming, "Where's the ass woman?" And the few times she appeared, it was like the camera was trained specifically not to show her back at all. As I reached the final cutscene, I had already given up hope of ever catching a glimpse ever again. Yet Acquired wasn't planning on letting me down, as right before the end, they let you catch the complete view in its full glory. I'll admit, I never clapped so hard at something in my life, such was the emotional roller coaster chasing after that ass. A big asses aside, look at the design on this motherfucking pistolero. That impeccable drip with the Tommy gun, oh! Clearly, the rule of cool is in full force here, and that is easily reflected on the gameplay. You should never bring a knife to a gunfight. That is, unless you know how to parry and dodge bullets. While he might run slower than he should, when successfully dodging an attack at the right time, Gojiro will spin twice as fast. The cherry on top is that you can chain this together, so when someone shoots an automatic in your direction, you just go really fucking fast. Just look at him go. If you are too cool for that, you can also parry everything, so the choice really is yours. While the moveset might seem limited in terms of attacks, by clearing certain objectives you can unlock new weapons, with each one belonging to a distinct playstyle. So if you favor a bigger katana that is slower but also more powerful, you can roll with that. But if you want to go fast and dodge everything, you might want to pick the double swords. There's even a style that has you move really low to the ground, which looks fucking awesome. But of course, as expected of Acquired, you don't just unlock weapons, but also accessories. And if you play their Way of the Samurai games, you know what that means. Cool cowboy hat? Of course. But do you want the small one or the American size? You want to show just how big your love for country music is? How about a little friend to accompany you on your journey? As expected of Acquired, the game is somehow short, clocking in at around 5 to 6 hours, but if you like what they have here, they give you more than enough to stretch the game up to so much more. This has always been Acquired's strength. They make a solid core gameplay experience in a small yet dense world, but then they give you the incredible variety for those who want to keep playing. You want to keep leveling but not feel overpowered? You got 3 more difficulty options. There are 20 weapons to get, including shit like a trident or the final boss's gun. This extends to the core game, where while it's possible to complete the game in one go, you'll probably get stuck at a later stage, incentivizing you to replay previous stages and get some more experience. To help alleviate the tedium of repetition, after completing a stage once, you can activate various challenges and modifiers, which in turn makes the stages harder, yet more rewarding as each one increases the multiplier for the rewards at the end. Later on, they even let you play as any other character in the game, plus a bunch of others from the Way of the Samurai, which is fucking crazy. Want to play as a tiny child while swinging around a bastard sword? Fuck it, here it is. You want to see all the cutscenes with them too? Why the fuck not? Some would be too cowards for that, but Acquired ain't none of that. Do you want to play as the woman with her ass out? Hell yeah you do, so here she is. The one real problem I have with the game is how they decided to make the camera trail behind you at all times, which, considering how snappy the controls are, will most likely leave you disorientated when you begin to change several sharp turns in a row. They really should remaster this. Just add a bit more stuff, put some quality of life improvements like better camera controls, and you got a pretty nice game. A true underrated hidden gem for a game that certainly deserves more attention. So go out and play it for yourself. And while you're at it, go play Way of the Samurai too. So why is Red Dead Revolver in here? Isn't this a Rockstar game? Well, you would be surprised. At least I was when I recently found out the curious origin for one of the biggest franchises in Nvidia. It all started with Angel Studios, a company who specialized in 3D animation in the early 90s by using the high-end workstations from Silicon Graphics, the same company that was developing the graphics chip for the Nintendo 64. This connection led Nintendo to be presented with their work, which impressed them to the point of proposing Angel Studios to join the special developer lineup working for their upcoming next-generation console, finally giving them the necessary push to shift their focus to game development. If you still don't recognize them by name, know that these are the same folks who worked on the miraculous port of Resident Evil 2 for the Nintendo 64, reducing the original PlayStation game that had to be in 2 separate discs into one single cartridge. Impressed with their technical capabilities, Yoshiki Okamoto, then Chief Operating Officer at Capcom, approached the team with a new concept for a game called SWAT, which would eventually turn into a western after Okamoto expressed interest in making another game in the genre, as he had previously worked on the classic arcade shooter Gunsmoke. As westerns seemed like an untapped market, both in its creative potential and market demand, both studios agreed that it was a great idea. But as time has proven repeatedly, great ideas never guarantee good results, and the relation between these two companies would suffer from it. They initially reused the acronym SWAT to mean Spaghetti Western Action Team, alluding to the simultaneous playable characters that would be one of the main features of the game. But this idea quickly got scrapped because of technical limitations. And unfortunately, this wouldn't be the last thing to be scrapped. As detailed in the 2018's Polygon article, The History of Red Dead, the severe cultural differences between the two studios had them clash in even the most basic tasks, like having a concrete idea of what the game was trying to be. In an attempt to salvage the situation, Capcom sent over some of their team members to work directly with Angel Studios, but the difference in work ethics proved to be a detriment to an already unstable collaboration. In one side, Angel Studios was a more relaxed environment where every Friday afternoon, everyone would wind down by partaking in an event the studio's founders like to call Sippy Whippy, where everyone would share shots of tequila. On the other side, Capcom employees like the famous Chun-Li designer Akira Yasuda reportedly spent his every waking moment working on the project, to the point where he literally slept under his desk at Angel Studios, a well-known practice of Japanese work ethics that had the American studio confused. Years later, Yasuda would go on to reveal on a different interview how he never wanted to go overseas in the first place, which ultimately led him to quit Capcom and turning freelancer, as it took a decade away from the industry because he was at a point where he even started hating games. During all of this, Angel Studios was sold to Take-Two Interactive and was rebranded as the now known Rockstar San Diego. Around the same time, Okamoto also departed from Capcom, and seeing how the project was under his care, they cancelled the project after 4 years of work. Luckily, in a review of the company's assets, the Hauser brothers, masterminds behind the Grand Theft Auto series, showed a particular interest in the game, and not so much the depressing state that was in, but as a jumping point to a Rockstar take on the Old West. Capcom was fine with this turn of events, only asking for the publishing rights over in Japan, if they actually manage to finish the game. With a final 9-month rush, Red Dead Revolver finally released on March 2004. So, how did it turn out for the first game in this critically acclaimed series? Now knowing the gist of the story behind it, I understand its fragmented state, a barely put together experience filled with great ideas that just barely land the closer you get to the ending. It is not often I give importance to the graphical quality of a game over the complete product, but damn, this really is barely done. The textures are so bloody that it looks like you went out of bounds to check something you shouldn't normally see.
Number 15, Burger King foot lettuce.
Even worse is that despite looking like this, the game has terrible performance, barely managing 30 frames with such a small resolution. I would put the blame to the difficult architecture of the PlayStation 2, but this also came out on the original Xbox, and there isn't a clear winner in this. At least the gameplay is overall pretty good, even if the lock-on system will fuck with you if you are used to more modern control aiming. This has to be the hardest soft lock I ever experienced in a game. As soon as you aim near an enemy, that reticle is going to take you for a ride. As a way to somehow counterbalance that for when the situation gets too chaotic, you have the Dead Eye, a special ability that allows you to slow down time and mark several different spots on enemies to quickly fire automatically in a split second. The release of Max Payne a few years back meant that any shooting game back then had to try their hand at bullet time. But if I had to take a guess, I would say that the fact that it's called Dead Eye has to have been an idea of Capcom, because first, it's the only time in the series where it's spelled all together as a single word, and second, because it sounds way too cool. Dead Eye actually changes according to the character you're playing, as the game is divided into individual stages where you play with different characters depending on the story's progression. There are even these intermission stages where you can explore a bit of the town and buy some items, and you can just feel how much they wanted to do with this idea, but all we got in the end were these barely working scraps. The story is also barely there, with an hastily put together cast of characters that seem to exist purely to have more characters on the multiplayer side of the game. Yeah, multiplayer. This game really wants you to play against other people, because every single fucking unlockable seems to be either a character or a stage for this mode. Even if they allegedly scrapped most of the weird ideas from Capcom, if you manage to complete the game once, and then again in hard and very hard, you unlock the Redwood Revolver mode, where you play as this Mokujin motherfucker, like a final secret sign that despite all, this once was a Japanese game at its core. Now knowing of its Japanese roots, one question remains. What does the title actually mean? In the previously mentioned interview, Red Dead Revolver's art director recalls what he said when first hearing the title, and I quote, "What the fuck does that mean?" Luckily, in the same article, Okamoto finally revealed that the Capcom employee Naoto Tominagi came up with the idea because he thought it was fun to play with two rhyming words, red and dead, which despite sounding cool, were just another thing that left Angel Studios confused, forcing them to retroactively try to make sense of the name by changing things like naming the protagonist Red and him burning his hand. Yep, it was all Japanese bullshit in the end, and I love how Rockstar still carries it along to this day.
Playtime is over.
There are still many others here that I would like to talk about, but I'll leave it at that for now. The future might look bleak for the genre, but who knows, maybe this will be the spark to ignite some developer's spirit. Now go, ride into that sunset with the heart of a gunman and the soul of a samurai.